Hello again, this is Dr. Kalam, and in this lecture we're going to discuss learning objectives from Chapter 5, and this is Week 2, Module 2. So in Chapter 5 we're going to be discussing or talking about learning objectives 5.1, which explains the techniques used in employment planning and forecasting. And we'll also touch upon how organizations recruit a more diverse workforce, and we'll get into some of the complexities involved in that process as well. So let's begin by talking about workforce planning and forecasting. So, workforce plans really should flow from a firm's strategic plan. And they're obviously going to be affected by the need to fill or eliminate positions and or reduce or increase costs. Keep in mind, labor costs are, our service organizations, hospitals, service industries, for example, can range anything from anywhere from 60 to 70, 75% or more in some cases. So reducing labor costs is an important process, and HR is instrumental in helping managers to understand how to balance and forecast. So forecasting, involves revenues. The process is then looking at the size of the staff that's required to achieve things like sales volumes, and we tend to look at statistical techniques when we examine sales volumes and trending and those kinds of statistical terms. A trend analysis requires studying a firm's employment levels, for example, over a period of time, and looks at predicting future needs. So we can look at cyclical trends in sales, for example. We can look at historical data over 3 to 5 years prior to our current strategic analysis. And then we can look at upward, downward trends and make some fair predictions just on those types of statistical analysis or trend analysis. So ratio analysis is another process that involves making forecasts between some causal factors. What causes? It's a simple statistical technique. Look at the cause and results. Dependent variables such as sales volume and the number of employees required, like the number of salespeople, for example. So your salespeople staffing would be your independent variable. Your dependent variable in a particular type of analysis would then be your volume, your sales volume. So if we manipulate the number of staffing levels, the number of people, the hours, and all of those other good things involved with independent variables and manipulation of those variables, we can make educated guesses about our volumes, staffing volumes or sale volumes. Okay, so and we can use a lot of other types of forecasting. Simple managerial judgment is really needed to adjust to any type of forecast. So when we're forecasting supply of inside candidates, we got to look at who's available, are they promotable, what position we need to fill to replace those candidates, and we need to look at possible replacements as well as their present performance, promotion, potential, or training. It's all part of a succession planning process or methodology that we have in our organization to get people ready to move into other positions. There's a thing called the Markov analysis in this chapter that you should really read about, and then we'll talk about a little bit more in our discussions, which is involves creating a matrix that shows several possibilities that employees in the chain of feeder positions, as we mentioned, for a key job will move from position to position, and therefore it will show some availability based on their preparedness to fill those positions. So it's an interesting process as well. And also, we should be cognizant of forecasting the supply chain, the supply of outside candidates, which might involve a considerable amount of management philosophy for workforce planning, for example. Requires organizations to pay very close attention to workforce planning issues. Succession planning, as I mentioned, is involved in developing a workforce and plans for that workforce, the company's top positions, and developing organizational leadership to enhance performance through that succession planning process. So let's move on to our final discussion, which is related to Learning Outcome 5.6, which talks about outside sources of candidates. And we look at the informal recruiting and hidden job market, for example. Many or most job openings aren't even publicized at all. And as such, the contributions by many aren't available. When we talk about recruiting a diverse workforce, we have to really look at recruiting women. The most effective strategy in top management for the recruiting women is to, really begin to understand the role that women play, females play, women play, and understanding that role and how it fits in with your organization, and making very few distinctions between men and women. In this analysis, we want to look at gaps in the recruitment and retention of women, and we want to put in place a comprehensive plan to attract women to positions in our organization, regardless of what the positions are. Another important concept or demographic or diverse group is single parents. They pose a particular challenge for recruitment purposes and for operational purposes. So understanding those needs, such as for personal sick time or excused days off, for example, time to take care of children. Many firms create or adopt processes where they allow flex time programs, provide some assistance. It might be temporary or more long-term for this particular group to be effective in the workforce. So older workers, which is the fastest growing labor segment, and they are the most tremendously talented people, if I may say so. And they're range from age 45 to 64 years old. A recent survey by American Association for Retired People, AARP, and the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, concluded that older workers tend to have lower absenteeism because of their work habits, more reliability again, and overall work performance better than younger workers. Okay, so and we have to consider that recruiting minorities obviously requires employers to understand the barriers that exist that prevent minorities from applying, and to tailor their working operations, HR design, HR practices that make their firms more attractive to minority workers for many reasons, and we can discuss that, and the text goes into that in quite good detail. And finally, let's talk about the disabled worker who has tremendous potential in the workplace, and pose and have difficulty applying and assimilating and orienting to our workplaces. So the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, for example, offers lots of assistance in different types of programs, and that all states have local agencies as well that provide placement services and other recruitment and training tools for this particular demographic group. So with that concludes a review of chapter 5 in week 2, module 2. So stay tuned, and we'll be continuing with week 3. Okay, thank you.